Hello, KFC SuperCoaches, and welcome to KFC SuperCoach TV for round 16 and the official KFC SuperCoach podcast, a special edition this week. This is the Phantom speaking. I'm joined, of course, by my friend in the green tracksuit, our Peyton, and it's a big week. It's a week to hopefully, well, we're hoping to celebrate. Coming out the other side of the buys, the green dots are back on our field. We're getting close to full premium teams. Clayton Oliver's going to be back. Elliot Yo's got his body right. He's going to play. What's happened now? The Supercoach keeps kicking us when we're down.
Yes, I know you must feel that way after it's been a pretty rough year, and it doesn't seem to be getting any easier on that front. Thank you for stepping into the hosting chair, Phantom Takeover for the podcast this week. There's been a few injury issues over in the Herald Sun, but I had to get on this week to talk to you about KFC SuperCoach, and I've got some Adelaide-based questions which I want to fire at you at some stage. But we probably should start with Clayton Oliver, because I know you, and I think Tim as well, two of the people who thought, well, one of the best scorers in the game and one of the most durable in his whole. He barely missed a game in his whole career. Never, plays through injury. He's got a hammy. He sort of, even I think the day that he did it, he said, "No, it doesn't feel too bad. I think I'll be playing in a week or two." So the smart move, it seemed, was to hang on to him, especially if you had enough cover over the buys. But it's just gone on and on and on, and it was a hammy, then it was a blister, and then he was in hospital, and now it's a hammy again. So can you, I suppose you're probably more on the ball than I am in terms of what's the latest on where he's at with this injury. And if you have been hanging on to him this whole time, surely thinking, well, at least after the bye, I can bring him back in and have my best team on the field. What do you do? Is it hard to divorce, sort of, try and forget what's happened the last month and just look at it in isolation as if this was just a 1 or 2 week injury and make a decision based on that? Or do you have to factor in the fact that it's dragged on this long? Who knows if it'll be another week or two or longer, and he just, as painful as it is after you've tried to be strong this time, you just eventually pull the pin and decide to go with someone else.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard thing to get over. I didn't start with him, went 8 weeks without him, spent all my money to get him in, had 2 weeks in my team, and now he's missed 7 in my team. So it is a frustrating one, but I think the point you try to make there is an important one. Take all that out of it. And if you had Clayton Oliver, he'd played every game so far this year, got injured last week, was a 1 to 2 week minor little hammy. At this stage of the year, with our trade counts, you're probably not trading a player at that point in that situation. Obviously, your judgment's a bit clouded by what's happened and the frustration you feel from why he hasn't come up and what Melbourne have said and what Goody said, and you thought he was going to be back for you, thought maybe a bit of a pod during the buys, maybe after the buys. It's not happening. But there was a little bit of good news, I think we can probably say. Simon Goodwin spoke on Thursday morning and said Oliver will train today. He's tracking in the right direction. We're hopeful without any other setback and him feeling better that he'll hopefully play next week. So we've heard that before. Yeah, we heard, I think, after the Collingwood game, Goody made the declaration that Oliver will play against Collingwood on King's birthday. So that was obviously 5 weeks ago. And now we still haven't seen him. So if you can't notice, I am frustrated. But I think I will hold him. Maybe if I had a few trades spare, I don't have many left. If I did have a few, maybe you could do it. But again, Mark obviously says here, pin is pulled on him. It can't wait any longer. Going to Dawson, should have done it last week. Obviously would have been a great move last week. Again, it's all about if you can afford the trade, because a 1 to 2 week premium injury, you're not trading at this stage of the year. Do you agree? You don't have him, I know, so you probably can look at it a bit more. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a funny game in it, SuperCoach, where for the first 10 or 11 rounds, I was just absolutely kicking myself for not picking him at the start of the year. And then the way it's turned out, it's worked out all right for me. So, a lot of luck can be involved. I think, like you said, it depends on how you're situated with trades. If you've got 5 or 6 or more trades left, I think I'd be tempted to cut and run, just because, like, how confident are we that he's going to be back next week or even the week after? Like, if it just keeps dragging on, You're just in this situation week after week, and it's just horrible. And it also probably comes down to what sort of cover you've got. Like if you can bring on an Angus Sheldrick who's scoring 90s, then that's probably not so bad. You can sort of live with that for a couple of weeks. But if you're relying on, Matt Johnson as well, scoring really well, he's your sort of mid-bench cover. But if it's, Mateus Philippou or someone like that, then you're maybe in a different situation. So, from this time on in the year, it always sort of comes down to, we use the phrase team dependent a lot, what your team actually looks like. But, if you're low on trades, imagine what a pod he's going to be in the last 5 or 6 weeks. I was thinking the same for, when I was half thinking about could I try and hang on to James Sicily, which I didn't do in the end. But anyone who did, he's going to be amazing in the SuperCoach finals. But if I had him, I would be very tempted to move him on, considering he's still worth 650 grand. You can do a lot with that money, whether you just straight swap him to another Uber Primo, or you sort of split the money and get someone who's 100 grand cheaper, and then that gives you some more cash to fix up an issue somewhere else on your field. But again, it relies on having trades to be able to do that.
Because he'll when he returns, he'll come out. There'll be I can't imagine there'll be any easing into it. He'll come out and score 200 the week he returns. So it'll be hard watching if you do trade him. It'll be enjoyable if you were on the long hold. Let us know out there in the comments, Clayton Oliver holders, what are you doing with him? How many trades you've got, and your decision with him. It's dividing a smaller part of the KFC Super community now, given how many have already traded him out. But it'd be good to get an idea. But a lot of KFC Super coaches looking to finish their team. And now, if you're listening, don't worry out there. Finish takes on a lot of different meanings, especially in this year of KFC Super Coach. We've had to deal with a lot of things. So, the ideal team of full of 22 of the top scoring guys is out of reach for many. You and I are probably included. So don't stress if you're not finished with the ultimate big guns. But Corey's looking at Dan Houston this week, Libba next week. Two pretty good ins. Some nice pods there as well, Corey, which we know we need on the run home to differentiate our teams a little bit when they're looking pretty similar. Now, before we get to a few other ones, are you finishing your team? What's your trade plan ahead of round 16?
Well, where my team sits at the moment is, sort of finished in, inverted commas, depends what you count as finished. I guess I've still got Will Ashcroft in my midfield. So that's definitely. So that's a rookie that, most people would have moved on by now. So I guess that's not finished, but I'm probably looking to maybe hang on to him for another 1 or 2 weeks, considering Brisbane plays the next two at the Gabba, where we know he scores quite well, and he's playing against Richmond and West Coast in those 2 games. So probably give him 2 more and then move him on. And then I've got Harry Sheasel as my sort of last defender. And, I think that's fine. He's probably going to score about as well as, who else have you got in D6 or F6 that is going to beat him. So I'm sort of happy to keep him, at least for the time being. I mean, people who hang on, we're looking at, do we sideways out Will Day? Can we trust him? He's an 80, sort of 90 guy, it seems like, rather than a primo. And then last week he came out and scored 140. So, I'm not looking to move those guys on super quickly. I'm okay with them as part of a finished team. The other one that, we probably don't want to spend too much time on because there won't be many people in this situation, but my last forward at the moment is Tom Hawkins, who looked a genius move when I brought him in for about 400K 8 weeks ago, and he scored 180 in about the second week that I had him, and a couple of 90s. He was looking okay, and then it's just been all downhill since then. And now he's worth about 380,000, unbelievably. So, part of me thinks he might score okay with Jeremy Cameron out of the team playing, the Swans this week. But really, that's a pod that is, costing me against the rest of the competition. So looking to move him on. My thinking was always to swap him to Darcy Cameron, who's now, I thought it was not going to cost me that much, but it will cost me nearly about 100 grand now, but I have that in the bank. So that'll give me sort of I think a pretty good scoring sixth forward, and ruck cover is going to be very handy, potentially in the run home with, I haven't got English, but we know he's been injury prone in the past, Rowan Marshall as well. So if those guys miss a game, that could be really helpful to avoid having to trade, having someone like Darcy Cameron. But what I wanted to throw at you, a bit of a left field idea that's come up today is, could I potentially, instead of trading in Darcy Cameron this week, and this is where I'm trying to find a bit of an advantage where I've got a couple more trades than maybe most people, or a lot of people ahead of me at least in the rankings, and trying to find a way to, just trading in Darcy Cameron really gained me that much. I'm sort of just cancelling out someone who's been potentially hurting me, but I'm not going to make a big difference compared to players ahead of me. But the player who is in form and around the same price as DC is Taylor Walker, one of Adelaide's favourite sons. Obviously, trading one key forward to another, that's not really how you're supposed to play the game. But he does have a break even well into the negatives after obviously scoring an absolute monster score a couple of weeks ago. But he was good again last week against Collingwood, turned up. And then the big key to this is that Adelaide plays North Melbourne this week. So trading in players looking for a favourable matchup is always fraught with danger. It doesn't really work out all that often. But you could see Tex having an absolute field day. He's kicked 10 against the Kangaroos before, probably going back a few years now. But and in fact, he only needs to score 100 and you go up about 70,000. So if he scores really, really well, you could keep him and ride that train for a few weeks. If he just scores okay, keep him for a couple of weeks, trade him out, make 100 grand on the deal, and then maybe you end up with DC there anyway. But is that a completely crazy move, or is that the sort of thing, going into it with eyes wide open of how risky it is that the sort of thing that you would think about doing to, differentiate your team, even if it's only for a couple of weeks, against those around me and ahead of me in the rankings?
Just quickly, Maddie, we'll get back to your question on Will Day in a second. Tex Walker, as you mentioned, very good at the MCG on the weekend. Dan Batten, our friend in KFC SuperCoach, keeps mentioning a friend of his. I'm not sure what his friends are like. Never met the guy, but going really well in KFC SuperCoach. If you are this Dan Batten's friend, please show yourself. Traded in Tex Walker last week. So took a massive money climb last week. It's going to get another one this week. It's a great money train trade in KFC SuperCoach. It's something, we would have been talking about this a lot. A lot more people would be talking about this trade if it was 6 weeks ago. You had the trades to do it. We jumped on your Bailey Humphries a bit late, Rory Atkins a bit late. To given the cash generation from those bottom end rookies was slowing down a bit. We needed the money to get up. So I don't mind it with Tex. You're probably not going to lose out. You've got a few more trades, so you can afford to then cash him into someone else when he gets above. He could get above all the forwards, really. Another big performance this week, and he could go past all of them. So I like it.
Imagine that you're turning him into Zach Butters in 3 weeks or something.
Yeah. And then the Crows play West Coast again to finish the year at some point as well, maybe in the last round, SuperCoach Grand Final.
Yeah, it is,
so you're probably not planning to keep him to that point, but if he scores on a couple of hundreds, you might sort of be a nice little loophole player as well. So, yeah, I don't mind it at all. Again, like we've said already, you have to do a few things different to get a bit of an edge. It's hard to get a bit of an edge at this stage of the year. So, I don't mind it. Maddie's question about Will Day, you mentioned Will Day in your finishing team. I've kept him as well. I was pretty confident that he could turn it around playing in the midfield. He was just a little bit untidy. He got a bit of attention, was working a bit through that. Last week, obviously, centre bounces again, and then push back behind the ball a little bit, obviously with no James Sicily in the team. So I think someone I saw compare it to the Jordan Dawson role. We've seen him do it, play on ball, then drift back behind the ball. Perfect for KFC SuperCoach. Obviously, as Matty mentioned, Sicily probably, Will Day, that's not going to happen when Sicily returns, but I still think Will Day's been good enough and can be good enough if he can tidy it up a little bit on ball. Scored 100 last round as well. I believe just in the midfield was pretty good that day. So I think he's all right. I think you're probably not trading him now. If you're going to do it, would have been at his buy. Some news here. Jeff asked if Matt Johnson will play this week. Another one you mentioned for the Clary Oliver holders. Aaron is one here as well. 7 trays left. Holding Oliver has already held him this long. Johnson's been decent enough cover. He has 99 and 96 in 2 of his past 3 matches. There was concern about his fitness, but the doctors have said during the week that he'll be fine to go. Just a bit of a corky last weekend. So Matt Johnson set to play this weekend. So Aaron's holding 7 trades left. That's probably right on the edge about, you could, with 7 trades, you can almost afford to move him on depending on how your team is going. But I like that. Another guy who can really come into the picture for KFC SuperCoach is looking for that final little upgrade. It's not going to cost them a lot. Harry Himmelberg. I traded him in before the bye. Scored 35 or 36 points in the first quarter, playing behind the ball as a quarterback against the Dockers at home. Then just fell away a little bit. The Giants dominated that game. There wasn't a lot of ball in the defensive half. So I still think in that role, we saw what he did at the back end of last year. I still think he can be the man. I still think it's good buying. I think it's worth the punt because we know he can go big. Have you thought about him?
Not really. I did in those first couple of weeks when he started going behind the ball, and he was extremely cheap, although he's still very affordable, $396K.
Yeah.
I'd probably just put him in the same bucket as a Will Day, Harry Sheasel, even a Jake Lloyd. There's a bunch of guys there who you could have as like your last defender, and he's got handy DPP. If you've still got Sheasel or Zeeble, and you can swing them between either end of the ground, or even Seamus Mitchell, who you're probably not looking to get rid of now. If you don't have to, that could be that. Gives him a little bit of a bonus there. But I don't know that he's going to average 110 like he did last year. It doesn't quite look like he's got that as friendly a role. Maybe just a different coach, and there's a few more guys back there now with Lockie Ash and players like this to share around the points. But I still think he's pretty good value. And if that's what you can afford, then I think he's fine. And, he'll probably average, 90 to 100, which is probably where I imagine, a Sheasel will be as well, probably Jake Lloyd as well. And Will Day, I would have thought in that basket, but if he can, get some massive numbers the next couple of weeks before Sicily comes back, he might, his average might be a bit higher. But, I think he's fine, but I'm not going out of my way to get him. But, given his price, if you're looking to finish off your team, I don't think he's a bad option, especially if you could even loophole him off the bench with if you've got one of these other guys. So, I quite like him, but not a must-have, I don't think.
This one is right up your alley, staying in defence now for options to finish your team. Ben says Luke Ryan or Jordan Ridley. We'll start there. We'll look at Keys in a little bit. But you weighed up this decision last week.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Yeah, I was agonising between the two of them, and I was going to get Ridley, and then I thought, hang on, Ryan's numbers are good, and then I went backwards and forwards, and I ended up getting Ridley, and I was sweating all weekend because another player who was in my sights was Nazai Wanganeen-Millera as a bit of a pod down there, and he went really well earlier in the round, and I thought, I just should have got him because he was a bit cheaper as well. And then, all those defenders went well, even Yo, who we know now is injured again, but he was another one I thought about, and he went well. And then Ridley just started out of this world. He was nearly 100 at half time, and I thought, this is unbelievable. How have I managed to get this, just hit the absolute jackpot? And then by the end, Ryan caught him, went past him, but they both scored, was within about 5 points, like 143 to 138 or something. Both scored absolutely massive. So I wouldn't expect either of them to go that high every week, but the role is clearly there. I mean, Ryan, has that ceiling. We know he can go huge. I didn't actually watch the game. I was just watching the scores, battling it out through the night. So I'm not sure how confident are we that Ryan's going to get that friendly role every single week. Ridley just seems to be just in a really hot vein of form. I think you had a really good stat in the SuperCoach Plus article this week that he's hit the target with his last 38 kicks or something like that. So he's not getting necessarily the 20 marks that Luke Ryan was getting, but he's just so efficient when he does get the ball that he's scoring really well. So, I think either of those guys are still a really good price, and I'd be happy with them. I think they're probably going to be maybe a slightly, 10 points above a Sheasel or a Himmelberg type. So, just toss a coin, really. They both look pretty good.
Yep. I watched that game last week in SuperCoach Plus as well. Says, Jordan Ridley only lost 3 points from negative acts on the weekend. Ryan was pretty efficient too, lost 18. So we know Jordan doesn't make many mistakes for the Bombers. He has 5 KFC SuperCoach tons on the trot now. Luke Ryan only 2 in the past couple of weeks. So I think Ridley's got the form to back in more. And we saw Luke Ryan go massive in round 1, 171, I think it was, against the Saints. Took a lot of marks that day. Took 18 on the weekend against the Bombers. So the Dockers changed a little bit. They went back. He just had the 50 to himself on the weekend. They went back to him every time, which is what he did in round 1. The Dockers seemed to move the ball a little bit differently after round 1, and when they changed a few things, went by hand a little bit more. So I agree with you. I don't think we can say that Luke Ryan is going to get that freedom or the Dockers are going to play through him all the time, because we would have thought that in round 1, then it changed. So I still think Ridley is the one to choose this week. Second part of the question, Ben Keys. I think 21 centre bounces for him on the weekend. That was his highest percentage, was third only to Jordan Dawson and Rory Laird at the Crows. Tagged Nick Dacos a little, but obviously, unlike in round 7, couldn't stop the young Magpie. Went a lot closer to him, I think, in the last quarter when he tried to get on, when he really got on top and just couldn't go with him. We know Dacos only needs 1 or 2 seconds and then he's gone. So Ben Keys, I think, did say pre-game in a story that went up somewhere, I can't recall where it was, but that, it is a defensive first role. He's in the midfield. So at least he's saying that that role should stay there. And even though he's going to be defensively minded, for the price probably the concern now. A couple of weeks ago, our friend Tim jumped on. We know that was probably pretty good buying. Now it's pretty expensive. And can he guarantee he keeps scoring KFC SuperCoach tons? I've been a bit skeptical. He's proven me wrong a little bit, but I think there's probably better options now at the price. What do you think?
I still quite like him actually, but yeah, Tim obviously hit the jackpot there, getting him a couple of weeks ago, and he was only 350,000. So it's a bit harder now, but he's still pretty decent value, 465, I think. Yeah. So and mid forward. So yeah, I don't mind him actually, but it's probably like for me, I'd be tossing up, unless I go left field and get Taylor Walker, sort of out of him and Darcy Cameron, and sort of similarly priced, and I'd probably still have Cameron ahead just because of that, the value of that ruck cover, and as you say, with the role. Probably not going to score, 120 plus anytime soon, but should be hovering around the 100. And, Adelaide does play the Kangaroos this week, so maybe an opportunity there for him to cash in a little bit. So, yeah, I think he's actually turned out to be, he's been a fantastic pick for Tim, and I think he could still be a pretty handy player. If you need just someone to, you don't have much money to spend to finish your forward line or your midfield, I don't mind him at all.
Aussie Soda here on YouTube. Shout out to all our listeners and watchers on the SuperCoach AFL YouTube channel. Subscribe there if you don't already. In the top 2.5K, obviously got Kieran Briggs. He's going to trade either him or Rowan Marshall, and he's going to look at Marshall Johnson and Thomas. He's going to bring Butters and Libber in. So we like the ins, but what do you think, Kieran Briggs over Rowan Marshall? I wrote last week that I thought Marshall was probably, obviously, the extra game, and he's still going to get. But now it's a different story. Obviously, they're going to play the same amount of games from here on in. It's still just, it's hard. It doesn't sit right trading Rowan Marshall over Kieran Briggs. As good as Kieran Briggs has been, still think I'd probably trade Briggs. What do you think? What do you still have?
Yeah, that's a. Yeah, well, my ruck line is Marshall and Briggs. It's R1 and R2 for me. So, so I'm not going to trade either of them, but I'm pretty happy with having those two guys. Just looking at their fixtures, I mean, Marshall plays West Coast on Sunday, so it probably could come back to bite you pretty quickly if you trade him out. I mean, you'd think Briggs is safe in there now, wouldn't you? Like you got Flynn hanging around and any of the other rucks that are playing for the Giants reserves, but he's just been so good, and the way he scores is really, like, his hit out to advantage rate is good, but he doesn't rely on hit outs obviously to get points. He's tackling and getting clearances and taking intercept marks and kicking goals. He's just doing everything. So, I don't know. That's a really hard one. I suppose if you trade Marshall, you've got a little bit more money, but there's probably not a huge advantage there as there was a couple of weeks ago. Now that Briggs has gone up so much, that's tough. I mean, you probably just play it safer and keep Marshall. You picked him at the start of the year knowing that he would, score well, and he has been good, even though the last couple of weeks a little bit quieter, but he's still scoring 90s. And he has some big games in him. As Jono here is confident as I would say a Saints fan, so I'd probably stick with Marshall. But yeah, can't complain about anything that Kieran Briggs has been doing.
Now this is one I think it's directed right at you. If I can find it here from
I think I saw this, yes.
If limited on cash, would Trent Cotchin be viable for F6 for the remainder of the year? Now, don't lie. Have you thought about bringing in your man, Trent Cotchin, 350K as a mid-forward, a big ton last round or last game?
I think he was under 300 a couple of weeks ago. No, not really. I mean, I've loved watching his last couple of games, bit of a career renaissance, but before that he hadn't done a whole lot this year when he's been playing more in the forward line. And the interesting, actually, I didn't see in the Tigers team, was Jacob Hopper back this week? He was supposed to be.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see what they do with Koch, whether he sort of gets pushed out of the midfield. Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's probably a straight swap then for Hopper. So he probably stays in there for at least another week. But, I mean, he's getting on. I assume this is going to be his last year. So I don't think you could bank on scores like that. I mean, maybe if you could loophole him with a Fife or somebody as your last forward, potentially. But, yeah, as much as I love Koch, I think I must have picked him in SuperCoach back in the day in 2012 and 2013 when he was a superstar mega primo midfielder. But, I don't think he's really a viable option anymore, as much as I do love him.
A viable option, though, I think, a few questions here. Callum Mills. Now, of all the things we say about Horst John Longmire at the Swans, all his work against KFC SuperCoach coaches in the past, what he did with Callum Mills last week was just exactly what we wanted to see. Played him on ball. He scored well early. Then they subbed him out in the third quarter. Didn't get anywhere near his break even. Fell to 430K. I think Callum Mills is 430K. So we saw enough. He scored 77 in not a lot of game time. Was good around the footy early. That's all we wanted to see. Down to 430K. Great buying. Might not get to 117 average, which is what he did last year, we saw, given how horses moved around a little bit. But I'm jumping on this week, 430K. But the thing is, as Matthew Murphy says here as well, he's giving Mills one more week. His break-even still 167. So you'd think the Cats on Friday night, you think that he's not going to get that. Probably not going to be subbed, I wouldn't have thought, like he was against the Eagles in his first game back. So he's probably going to come down in price. He could be even at closer to 400, depends what he scores. Even with a pretty decent score, even if he scores three figures, he probably still falls to about 400. So the money you've got, if you need to wait, if you need an extra 30K, then maybe you can wait on Callum Mills. But then it also depends on, I'm trading Bailey Humphrey to him, and if Humphrey does play this week, he's going to break him at 120. So he's going to fall as well. I don't want a lower score. I don't want to run the risk of him scoring 40 or 50 or less again on the field. So I'm going to make that move this week. But again, there definitely makes sense to hold to. As we mentioned, very team dependent. Before we get to captains for the round, what do you think on Callum Mills?
I'm not as confident as you, I don't think, of that midfield role. Just looking up, I think he had 24% CBAs last week, which is probably thrown out a bit by the fact that he didn't play in the last quarter. So maybe that's more like 30 or 40. But they've got a lot of players now. They play through the midfield now with Sheldrick getting a good run in there as well. I think he's still likely to be thrown around by Horse over the last part of the season. But if his price gets down to 400 or even under, then I think you can't really ignore that, given we know what he's capable of. And looking at the Swans draw, the next week after the Cats this week, they play Richmond. So if I'm reading that correctly. And I think if we look at his history against the Tigers, I'm pretty sure he scored about 170 on us a couple of years ago when he was just parked behind the ball. We just kept kicking it to him, which we're good at. So that could be the ideal time to bring him in. And again, it's this sort of, he could be the perfect swap for me for Ashcroft. Like in the midfield there, just finish off your midfield. He's probably not going to be in your top 3 or 4 scoring mids. Like if you'd picked him at the start of the year, you might have been hoping for. But as an M8, it's going to be hard to find someone better than him, especially when we're going to be sort of a bit strapped for cash in the last few rounds. And, if that means that you have 100 grand left over, like I'd probably rather pick him at 400 and save 100,000 and keep it in the bank for a rainy day rather than scratching around and finding, if you can get up to a Libba, then that's one thing. But if you're, buying someone in the 500K range anyway, because it could be very handy to have that money just sitting there when, if a Sicily, these guys got suspended, but if, a Yo gets injured and it's instead of at the end of the game where at least he scored okay and made 50 grand, but if he gets injured in the first quarter and loses 50 grand, then what do? You sort of need a bit of cash in reserve. So, I think next week he could be the perfect time to bring in Callum Mills. But, wouldn't mind having one more week to look at him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And we saw, got moved around, still averaged 100 KFC SuperCoach points when he was thrown around. So you're right, you're not going to get your 117-point average. And if you've got the money, you probably look elsewhere. But the perfect sort of value, if you need to finish your team, you don't have many trades left or cash. As you mentioned, a few questions coming in here about captains. What are we going to do this week? Let's move on to the VC&C, I think.
Yes, well, we love this segment. It's Friday night, the footy is on, and your KFC Friday night feast is on its way. Score free delivery on your Friday night footy feast every Friday when ordering through the KFC app or kfc.com.au. It's game on, fans, and we have a big Thursday night game tonight. The Tigers playing up at the Gabba, and there's, I think, some pretty juicy captain options there, and then across the whole weekend. So where do we look?
Oh, it's almost as juicy as some big bucket of original recipe KFC chicken hour. Well, it's as much as there's some good options around. There's a few in the comments already. Jordan Dawson, obviously at home against North Melbourne. Jack Sinclair was obviously good. Rory Laird at home but it's hard, surely, to go past Lachie Neale and Josh Dunkley tonight. Captains and vice captains is a way to get a little bit of an edge when it's tough to get one in KFC SuperCoach in the run home. But you probably can't overlook Dunkley in his form or Lachie Neale against the Tigers, who we know give up significant points. And just to try to be different, I don't think you can afford to do that. So Neale or Dunkley for me, into probably your Rory Laird or Dawson on Saturday afternoon against North Melbourne, I reckon, is the way I'm probably going to go. But I'm pretty confident that whoever I go with tonight, which it might be maybe Lachie Neale, potentially, to go a little bit different to Josh Dunkley, but one of them for me.
Yeah, I think, I heard a few people saying, a bit disappointed last week that everybody put the VC on Dunkley, and we all took it when he scored 121 or something, and we all missed out on Errol Goulden's 160 or some of these much higher scores, Dawson or someone like that. And you're thinking, I could have got an edge on everybody if I'd just been a little bit braver and, thought outside the box. But then the problem is, what if everybody VCs Dunkley and he scores 150 and you miss out on that? There's the opposite way that it could go. So, there's risks associated with trying to go a bit different. But, it's hard to go past those two guys. I mean, Dunkley's, that 120 was about his lowest score in about 6 weeks. So, hard to see him scoring much lower than that tonight, especially when Richmond don't really put much attention into opposition midfielders. And Lachie Neale's the other one who's in a pretty good vein of form at the moment after a bit of a slow first half of the year, and he has a fantastic record against Richmond. I remember going to the MCG a few years ago and seeing him have 51 disposals against us.
190.
It's never been in the Richmond MO to tag, and that hasn't changed even with Minnie McQualter taking over as coach. And I sort of thought, maybe Neale's numbers haven't been as amazing against Richmond in recent years. But looking up last year, the elimination final up at the Gabba, when obviously those numbers didn't sort of count in KFC SuperCoach, but he had 39 disposals against Richmond, 15 clearances and 156 points. So, I think tossing the coin between those two. I mean, Tim Taranto is another one that has just been scoring so well lately and, could easily go 130, 140 a game. But up against those two lines, I think you pretty much have to VC somebody tonight. And then that might be all she wrote. But if they don't pay off, then, you've got a lot of choices over the weekend. Those Crows against North is going to be a pretty good way to go. And I think Rory Laird probably be my choice for a captain ahead of Jordan Dawson. He tends to score better maybe against the lower teams. Laird, that's not a knock on him at all, but Dawson maybe hasn't been as reliable. And then the other one is the Bont, who, we shouldn't forget about. He's just coming back off the bye. Remember him, he's the number one scorer in KFC SuperCoach this year. And playing Fremantle at Marvel Stadium, when they played in round 6, he scored 182 points. And his two previous games against them, 100 and 149. So, he probably should be one that should be part of our thinking as well.
Yeah, and also if you're looking for something a bit different, maybe Rowan Marshall against the Eagles in the final game of the round. You know how good he is at winning the footy as well. Could have 25 himself, and then and Monster them in the ruck. So a few good options there, but I think we all agree. Well, Theo says Lachie Neale into Errol Goulden. Errol Goulden, obviously a big VC a big VC winner last week. And I think you probably want a VC, Errol Goulden, especially against the Cats. I wouldn't fall back onto him as a C. But again, if you want to look at the VC, then Friday night, Swans and the Cats. Maybe if you want to go for a bit different, you go VC, Errol again. But I wouldn't fall back onto him as a C, especially with a bit tougher matchup, I think, this week. But that'll do us here, I think, on KFC SuperCoach TV for round 16. A big week. Enjoy those green dots, hopefully. And, of course, you can check out all the latest news, a few DPP, a bit of intel, which we didn't talk about. You can look at that on heraldsun.com.au, codesports.com.au. All your latest trade advice and news. We'll be back here on KFC SuperCoach TV next week. Enjoy the footy.
Thanks, guys.